Now, Randy, it's my understanding that you've got some breaking Iowa Caucus news for us.
This is just breaking on Twitter. The Iowa Caucus was just found dead in its cell. Authorities are ruling it a suicide.
Well, it was feeling pretty despondent. Joining us to weigh in on yesterday's debacle is author and columnist who you can read online at AnnCoulter.com. Ann Coulter, welcome to the program.
So great to be here.
How fantastic
was
last
day. Wow, these Democrats. What's that knot where the more you struggle, the more it tightens, and you end up killing yourself? Whatever that knot is, the Democratic Party is the human version of that knot.
How can something like this happen? If you were to write a script and you were to write what happened yesterday into the script, they would give it back to you and say, no one would believe this. Come back with something else.
No, it is really great, and I'm happy about it because I've always hated caucuses, not for any ideological reason. I mean, unless you consider an opposition to people who are pushy, aggressive, and zealots a political position. But caucuses always reward people who are pushy, aggressive, and zealots. I mean, how many people can sit around until 1 a.m., arguing with people and, come to our side, we'll give you a Snickers bar. Well, people without jobs, students, people who don't have to get up the next morning. And by and large, I mean, as I've said a million times, it's like a New York co-op board meeting where, at some point, even though everyone is against the person who wants to, redecorate the lobby, normal people with jobs just give up and go home. Okay, whatever you want. I can't stay here till 3 a.m. And the zealots always end up winning. Without a majority of the vote. I hate caucuses. I hope this is a stake in the heart of caucuses. But, oh my gosh, is this embarrassing for the Democrats. First they blow the impeachment, and now they can't even hold a caucus. As I said on Twitter, next, the Democrats try boiling water. It's so embarrassing for them. As for the results, which are coming in at this very moment as we speak, there are a couple of interesting things about it. I mean, who knows, because of all the reasons I just said we should discount caucuses. New Hampshire, I believe, has been a more reliable predictor of the eventual nominee than the Iowa Caucus. But one thing that, assuming it's 62 reporting now, it looks roughly like, and who knows, it could change with only 62% in, but yes, Buttigieg number one, followed by Sanders, possibly Warren, and then Biden fourth. So one thing, it kind of looks like Biden's done here. I mean, maybe not. Maybe those will be famous last words. He'll come roaring back in New Hampshire. That did sort of surprise me. On the other hand, the fact that it's Sanders and Buttigieg leads me to believe that this is sort of the Democrats' version of going for Donald Trump, which is to say, Americans, whatever your political stripe, hate Washington, D.C. Hate it with a passion. And anyone who seems to be outside of what Donald Trump has accurately identified as the swamp, i.e. a mayor from South Bend, and Bernie Sanders, though he has been a senator forever, he certainly does not seem senatorial. I'd also say, if I were a Democrat, Buttigieg and Sanders are two of the best spoken. Buttigieg is, I think he's a self-righteous little prig. But
that's
he
prig,
is,
just to be clear.
That was prig. But he is articulate. I will grant them that. He is young. I'll grant them that. And I like Bernie's positions on some things. I wish he'd go back to his authenticity, for example, as we've discussed before, on immigration, but he doesn't seem to be one of these forever war guys. He's not a big fan of Wall Street. All of that is sort of a piece with the populism that's not only sweeping America, but quite obviously sweeping Europe right now.
Well, these things tend to go in global waves. I mean, if you go back to the 1980s, it wasn't just Ronald Reagan. There was Margaret Thatcher over in
Brian
England.
Mulroney.
That's right.
Mulroney, yeah.
That's right. And then in the 90s, you had kind of this center-left thing that was going on all over the world, where you had Tony Blair and Bill Clinton and people like that getting elected. Mm-hmm. Now you have populists, whether it's Brexit or what's going on in the UK right now, what happened in Australia, what's happening here in the United States. It's going on all over the place, and it doesn't look like it's stopping anytime soon, and it doesn't look like the Democratic Party's immune to it either.
Yes, based on Iowa, and who knows, this could be a total outlier. I mean, it was obviously a complete disaster. But that's kind of how it looks to me with Sanders and Buttigieg on top. One other thing that kind of leaps out at you, Warren, and technically Sanders, but again, I really feel like he's not even seen as being part of Washington, but I don't know, in outer space circling above it. Warren, Klobuchar, Sanders, they were all stuck in Washington for the last 2 weeks. So this is one of the ways the Democratic Party may have screwed themselves. I think Klobuchar is also very well-spoken. I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a fan. But I would have less of the fear of God going through me on election night if it were someone who's sensible and bright and well-spoken, like Amy Klobuchar. If Biden's done and she picks up Biden's votes, which naturally, I mean that would seem like a normal move to me. I don't see you going from Biden to Sanders. She could be a contender.
Well, the person who hopes to pick up Biden's support if Biden were to fizzle away would be Michael Bloomberg. And can you stick with me for another segment? I want to talk to you about him because he wasn't on the ballot yesterday in Iowa, but people are saying he might have actually been the winner because he didn't participate in any of that mess. Our guest is Ann Coulter. You can read her online at anncoulter.com. It's 2:43. Let's go ahead and take a look at the roads. And we're back with Ann Coulter at 2:48, Talk Radio 790 KABC. Don't forget you can follow Ann on Twitter at Ann Coulter. So, Ann, a lot of people have been saying on social media that Michael Bloomberg may be the big winner to come out of last night because he didn't participate in the mess and he wasn't involved with it in any way, shape, or form. Do you think there's any truth to that?
I don't really see how it happens. A lot of people say that, and particularly I know he's very popular with New York Wall Street types, but I just have the sense with him that it's something that people convince themselves of by repeating it. How is his past different? I mean, I can think of a few ways, but not any significant ones, from, what's his name, Tom Steyer, who finished Iowa, at least from what we can see now, with less than 1% of the vote. Another very rich and passionate man who spent a lot of money on television ads. I mean, I guess I've heard the argument, perhaps it was from you, that if Sanders got the nomination, Wall Street would be so freaked out they would mount a huge campaign to draft Bloomberg at the convention. And I don't know, I mean, Wall Street's popular, but I just don't see the demographic Bloomberg is popular with, and particularly if, and this is a big if because Iowa is so insane, I'm not sure we can draw any conclusions from it, but if it's a bellwether on what I'm interpreting as a bit of a populist outsider, a preference for the outsider, I'm not seeing a Wall Street billionaire, very, very short, nasally voiced Bloomberg as a huge hit there. I don't know, maybe he's seen as an outsider, but it didn't work for Tom Steyer.
Well, let's say that Biden loses New Hampshire and Nevada, which is entirely inside the realm of possibilities. His firewall is South Carolina, but if he loses the first three, he's going to take some kind of hit in South Carolina. How big, we don't know. Let's say he loses in South Carolina. What does the Democratic establishment do? Do they double down on Biden, or do they freak out and do they cut bait on him and go with Bloomberg or Mayor Pete or someone else?
I think they might be ready to cut bait on Biden right now. I mean, these are quite surprising results in my opinion. Biden coming in fourth in Iowa. I think a lot of us expected it to go the way these things usually go, the name that's been around, the sort of tried and true. Wow, that's not what we got from Iowa if Sanders and Buttigieg are finishing on top. And again, that's an if. We have 62% reporting, and the whole thing is kind of a circus. I mean, if I were the Democrats in the back room, I'd say let's ease out Biden and go pedal to the metal for Amy Klobuchar right now, or maybe Pete Buttigieg. Again, just because I find him a self-righteous prig doesn't mean everyone does. I don't see him being a hit with African American voters, and they're like a quarter, 30% of the Democratic primary vote. So to have a little rat-faced boy, 4 feet tall, and has a husband as your nominee, it's hard for me to see that lasting. But it was hard for a lot of people to see Trump lasting.
Well, and if you look at some of these Super Tuesday states that are voting, Arkansas, Alabama, North Carolina, Texas, they have huge black populations in the Democratic primary, and he's polling at 0% among blacks. If he's going to poll at 0% among blacks, he ain't winning any of those states.
No, maybe they can be convinced. Maybe they prefer the little rat-faced boy to a woman candidate. Although I don't know, they liked Hillary. But perhaps they can be convinced to switch their support from Biden if Biden throws his support behind somebody else. I guess a lot comes down to New Hampshire right now. But wow, this was a huge hit on Biden. It was a huge victory for Buttigieg, and it was a reasonable victory for Klobuchar.
Well, Klobuchar was supposed to do much better than she did, though, in Iowa, because Iowa looks a whole lot like Minnesota. And if you can't win the home game, how are you going to win in South Carolina, or how are you going to win in New Hampshire? I don't see her finishing in the top 3 in any of those other states.
You're probably right. I think it's wishful thinking on my part, and you've nailed me on it. Congratulations, John Phillips. Okay, what's my counter argument? I guess the only things I'd say is one, she was tied to the Senate, as admittedly were Warren and Sanders for the last 2 weeks, and she really needed to be in Iowa and not sitting and listening to this stupid impeachment trial. And point 2, my suspicion that if I were a Biden voter, I would definitely flip over to Amy Klobuchar.
Last question before you go, and we're running out of time, so yes or no. Is there any chance at all President Trump doesn't spike the football about Iowa at the State of the Union tonight?
If he were smart, he would not. They've made complete asses of themselves. Be magnanimous. Everybody knows. Talk about the jobs numbers.
All right. We're going to have to leave it there. Ann Coulter, thanks so much for stopping by today. Always fun.
Good to talk to you.